I think that while preparation is incredibly important, and while we try to anticipate all the threats or risks or challenges we're going to face,
Mhm.
that only will get you so far, right? And then you're going to have to just rely on instinct, experience to make decisions in the moment the best that you can, and hope that you've developed your team enough that they're willing to help you make those decisions and execute those decisions.
Our guest is Sharon Preszler, the first woman to pilot an F-16 fighter jet. She shares her experiences and insights about what it takes to make high-stakes decisions when every second counts. Join us for episode 419 of Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper.
This episode is brought to you by Business Advancement Incorporated, enabling successful leaders and companies to accelerate to their next level of success. On the web at businessadvance.com. And now, here's Pam and Scott.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Pam Harper, founding partner and CEO of Business Advancement Incorporated. And right along with me, as always, is my business partner and husband, Scott Harper.
Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you again. And as always, our purpose here is to help visionary leaders ignite game-changing innovation, transformation, and growth.
And remember, Growth Igniters Radio is only one of the ways we help top leadership teams ignite game-changing innovation and transformational growth. Curious about how we might help you and your company? Let's talk. Visit businessadvance.com today and schedule a call with us.
Now, as we all know, leading any company these days is not for the faint of heart.
No matter what kind of organization we lead, the pressure to consider the impacts on our many stakeholders can be absolutely gut-wrenching when we need to make split-second leadership decisions.
Now, we all of us want to make the best possible decisions that draw on both our wisdom and our experience.
But we've seen that no matter what we face, the more we've internalized what really matters to us and to our many stakeholders, the more effectively we've been able to make even the toughest decisions.
That's right.
And someone else who's had enormous experience with this kind of leadership is our guest today, Sharon Preszler. She was handpicked as one member of the initial cadre of women fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. She was the first woman to fly the F-16, a single-seat, single-engine fighter, and the first woman to fly combat missions and instruct the F-16. Sharon has over 1,300 hours in the Viper, including over 50 combat hours in Iraq and one ejection due to electrical failure. Oh, my. In her 20-plus years of service in the U.S. Air Force, she was also a navigator, piloted a Learjet, and spent time in North American Aerospace Defense Command, writing our homeland defense plans after the terrorist attacks on 9/11. And these plans are still in use today. After retiring from the Air Force in 2006, Sharon worked for Southwest Airlines, where she flew over 9,000 hours in a Boeing 737. She retired from Southwest as a captain in 2020 and is enjoying her third career as a speaker, adjunct professor, and life coach. And I know her as a speaker, and I'm just honored to be able to have this conversation. You can read much more about Sharon Preszler by going to growthignitersradio.com, episode 419, and scrolling down to the bio link in resources. Sharon, welcome to Growth Igniters Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be here.
So let's talk about this experience that you've had with piloting an F-16. I mean, most of us don't know what it's like. It's different, very different from any kind of flying that we do. So tell us about that.
It is. So, first of all, it's an amazing jet. I absolutely loved flying it. But there is a lot of work involved. So one of the things that all fighter pilots deal with is G-forces. And when you think about gravitational forces, our normal life is spent at 1 G. And when you ride a roller coaster or something and you feel kind of squished in your seat, that can be up to about 3 Gs. And the F-16 can pull 9 Gs.
Yeah.
So what happens when you're pulling those G's is everything feels 9 times as heavy as it normally is. So your head, instead of weighing 9 pounds, weighs, 81 pounds.
Oh my God.
And also the blood tries to, because everything's being forced down, the blood tries to cool down in your lower extremities. So we spend a lot of time doing what's called a G strain, using our equipment to keep the blood flowing properly so our brain will work properly, as silly as that sounds. I mean,
Yeah.
people often, there's a G induced loss of consciousness that many people face in the F-16.
It's not something you immediately get used to. I imagine it takes time to get to a place where you can
Yes.
actually deal with that level of pressure.
So in pilot training, we start with lower G airplanes and you get used to, 5Gs and 7Gs. And then you get
Yeah.
to the F-16 and there's a lot of physical fitness requirements as well, because you need aerobic and anaerobic strength
Yeah.
to maintain the Gs. And then, on top of all that, you have this helmet, right, that you're always wearing, face masks that covers your mouth and nose, your
Yeah.
visor, and you're in this, in F-16 in particular, you're in this bubble canopy. If you remember what an F-16 looks like,
Yeah.
where
Right.
so you're kind of elevated and you're just looking out. You don't even see like the canopy rail. It's beautiful, but it's also hot on the ground. And, it's a very demanding airplane because we tend to, if we're really employing it properly, we're going fast. And it can be even like when you're close to the ground, you're going 8 or 9 miles a minute. To put that in
That's
perspective.
pretty incredible. So fast decision making is very much a part of being in an F-16.
Yeah.
You mentioned in your bio that you actually had to make a decision about ejecting.
That whole process from the time I first had a malfunction to the time I ejected was 5 minutes or less.
Wow.
Right? And I didn't realize it was gonna be as serious as it was. That part only lasted about 30 seconds, right? So I knew I had some electrical problems, but not how serious it was until I landed and my brakes didn't work. So there's no way to stop the airplane on the runway. We do have hooks and cables like you see on an aircraft carrier, but that didn't work either. And so as you're rolling down the runway at basically 100 miles an hour, looking at the end of the runway coming rushing up, you just do what you've been taught in training, and you pull the handles and you eject.
Bug out.
Yeah.
Now, after you retired from the Air Force, you flew for Southwest. And there's a contrast of being captain for a large airline. You're leading a gate crew and you're on board crew and gate agents and baggage handlers and so on. But you're also making life altering decisions because every second does count, even in
Yes.
commercial flight.
And the difference with Southwest and flying a fighter is most of the time the flying at Southwest is relatively benign, right? Normally things go as planned, and that's great. Like I always said once I went to Southwest Airlines that a boring flight is a good flight,
Okay,
right?
that makes sense.
But you do end up with maintenance issues, weather issues, fuel issues, customer issues, all these things, and then the timing becomes just as critical, right? Because if you have a medical emergency in the back of the airplane,
Yeah.
where are you going to land? Are they going to have the place you have to pick has to have good medical services? You have to alert everybody. You have to figure out how to get to that place from, 40,000 feet as expeditiously as possible. So you do end up with a lot of those same high pressure decision making. It just doesn't happen quite as often.
And so when we're talking about piloting, whether it's an F-16 or it's a Southwest jet, you're still dealing with leadership. And some people
Yes.
would say, well, in the F-16, you're just leading yourself. We talked about a decision to eject, but you've said it isn't like that.
Yeah, no. So that decision obviously was solitary. That I was the only one in the airplane. But if you're flying an F-16, you're going to be flying in a formation. Usually at least 3 other aircraft, so you're a 4 ship. But if you're going into combat, like we've seen lately in Iran or anywhere else, you're going to be part of a large package that includes air refueling airplanes, radar support airplanes, other fighters that do different missions. So you can have like 60 airplanes all involved in this one mission.
So you're impacting a lot of people, a
Yes.
lot of stakeholders, we will call them.
Yes.
Mm.
And, I was qualified as a mission commander in the F-16, so I could be leading that entire package of 60 jets. So you get everybody involved and you do the planning, and you have to understand and rely on the experts in each of their airplanes as to what their best role in the mission is. And then you work to make a plan that makes everybody the most effective with the least amount of risk. And then you have to brief that plan well enough and have everybody understand it well enough that you can all execute it with very little communication in the air.
So preparation,
yes.
preparation.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Right. So again, let's parallel it. I think it's fascinating. People would say, well, they're two very different things, the F-16 and a Southwest jet or commercial airliner. But it isn't, because you've talked about how many stakeholders there are when you were a captain. How many different types of stakeholders did you have to consider?
So we have my fellow pilot, right? My first officer. We have flight attendants. We have passengers who definitely consider themselves important stakeholders, right?
Right.
But in addition to that, we have the gate agents, the operation agents, the dispatchers who make our flight plan and look at our weather and things and relay information to us. We have provisioning people who make sure we have everything on the airplane we need, and rampers who load the baggage and fuel the airplane and make sure we have water to make coffee. I mean, it's just a huge operation.
And the leadership decisions are often very quick there too, not just in the emergencies that everybody thinks about.
Right, because there'll be unexpected weather at your destination, and now we need a alternate, and we need a different plan, or there'll be a maintenance issue, and I get to decide with coordination, of course. Are we taking this airplane airborne? Are we getting it fixed first? Is it okay to go like it is, and we just have to do some paperwork? And all of these things. And then one of the most important pieces, as is true for most leaders, is communication. I'm sure most people have sat in an airplane and not known why it's 10 minutes past push time and then we haven't left the gate.
Exactly.
And,
things moving along, we need to
yes.
know.
And the less you communicate, the more frustrated your stakeholders are going to become.
And it also helps all of this communication before, during, after the flight. It helps implant a picture of what needs to happen, even in unpredictable circumstances, so that it's in your brain when you need it to be in your brain.
Yes.
You don't have to go, oh, what do I do now?
Right. And I would always work to build relationships with my flight attendants or the ground crew in Phoenix, especially where I was based and anywhere else we went, so that they understand that we're taking their input into account, right? So when it's 110 degrees outside in Phoenix and you have rampers down there on the tarmac tossing bags and it takes a little longer than normal, we should probably be patient with that.
Right.
Because they're doing the best they can in the circumstances they have.
There's a lot of leadership that goes on in advance, I would say.
Yes. It's kind of like building any of your teams, right? In any kind of business application, if your team knows that you have their best interest in heart, as well as the mission, whether that's a corporate mission or a military mission, then when you have to make split-second decisions, they're going to be more likely to trust you. You have built the credibility to make those occasional authoritative decisions, if you will.
There you go.
Exactly.
My least favorite type of leadership style is authoritative. I'm much more of a coaching as a leadership style person, where I build that teamwork and I know that my team is loyal to me because I've laid the groundwork. But then when you have to make those snap decisions and you don't have time to take all the input, they're going to trust you and they're going to execute the decision you make.
That's right. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll dig deeper with pilot and speaker Sharon Preszler about making leadership decisions when every second counts, including a remarkable story that brings all this to life. Stay with us.
This is Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper. We're brought to you by Business Advancement Incorporated. That's us. And we're on the web at businessadvance.com.
Well, here we are. We're in our 12th year of Growth Igniters Radio, and we're continuing to gain recognition as a top podcast. We've been honored by Thinkers 360 and the PopCon Podcast Awards, and we're also ranked in the top 5% of global podcasts by the podcast database Listen Notes. And building on this, you can now get episodes two ways. You can listen on audio platforms such as Apple, Spotify, and others, as you always have been able to do. And you can watch us on YouTube and other video streaming platforms.
So now you have two ways to love us. And if you are, help us out. Become a recommender. Just open our podcast on whatever app you use and write a review. And please share links to your favorite episodes. Maybe this one with Sharon on your social media.
Welcome back to Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper, that's me, and Scott Harper. Today, Scott and I are speaking with pilot and speaker Sharon Preszler about making some of the toughest leadership decisions when every second counts. Sharon, tell us how people can find out more about you, your speaking, and anything else you'd like us to know.
Yes. So I do speaking. I'm a life coach as well. And the best way to find out more about me or what I can do is at SharonPreszler.com. P is in Paul, Reszler.
Okay.
He sneaks up on you.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it does.
And you can find more information and links for this episode by going to growthignitersradio.com, episode 419, and scrolling down to resources. Now, in the first segment, we spoke about Sharon's experiences both as a pilot of an F-16 and also as captain of a commercial airliner, and how both of them depend upon relationships with stakeholders. Even when it seems like you're leading alone, you're always leading others. And not just the people closest to you, but people that you wouldn't normally expect who have impacts on you and you have impact on.
Yeah.
Sharon has an amazing story that she told us, and we really want you to hear this. And it brings her big idea about leadership under the toughest circumstances alive. Sharon, tell us.
Yes. So when Scott and Pam asked me about tough decisions, it was interesting that what came to mind was actually not a flying story, because flying tends to have so much training involved that you can rely on that when you're making your critical decisions. And we were wanting to look at something more unexpected.
Yeah.
So it made me think back to my time at NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command. I was relatively new there. We had an exercise going on, and I was on my first shift in Cheyenne Mountain, which is the big nuclear-proof bunker in Colorado Springs.
Mm-hmm.
So I got there that morning, and I was part of what was called the strategy cell. And we had been already pulled out of the exercise because what routinely happens in NORAD is the Russian bombers up across the Bering Straits come across and kind of poke at our fighters, and they intercept, and it's just testing, right? It's just testing
Yeah.
each other's
Right.
defenses.
Right.
So that was going on. So we were pulled out of the exercise to handle that real world. So we're sitting off in a different room, and we're not on the main operations floor. And while we're working on that, I keep hearing something from the operations floor about an aircraft crash, right? And as a pilot, we're always going to want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I told my guys, hold on a minute. I went out there and I looked at the big screen just in time to see an airplane, a big airplane, run into a giant building. And I was standing behind a Canadian friend of mine because this is a binational command. And I said, dude, how does that happen? It's a perfectly VFR day, which means it's sunny and clear. And there's no way you could know you're running into a building. And he turned around and looked at me and said, that was the second one.
9/11.
Yeah, 9/11. And my heart just sunk, right? And because the second one was, we now know we are under attack. And we're under attack in a way we had never anticipated, right? NORAD plans to defend from military attack, not from airliners running into buildings.
Yeah.
So that was the most unexpected scenario I have run across, and decisions that were made. And some of the very quick decisions that were made were grounding all the commercial aircraft, which caused great inconvenience all across the country and the world, right? Because there's already international airplanes coming from Asia and Europe that are coming to the U.S. that we're not going to let land. We're not going to let them even enter our airspace. So the impact on them, the impact just on commerce in general, the impact on the economy, everything. But it was the right thing to do because we didn't know how many other airplanes were planning to do something similar, right? So we were in the process of grounding that before the airplane crashed into the Pentagon, before, they crashed into the field in Pennsylvania, all those things. And it was just, those were the split-second decisions. And then once you make the split-second decisions, right, and face the immediate threat, now you have to take a breath and think about, what does this really mean for us, and what are we going to do? We had alert fighters, because that's part of what we do at NORAD, and we scrambled those guys. We had people that were going to basically crash into, on purpose, an airliner to prevent it from crashing into the White House. And that's those kind of decisions are not things you'd ever have to make. And obviously, I wasn't making those decisions.
Right.
General Eberhardt was making those decisions.
Right.
But
But you
we're
were
involved
having
in the
input
yes,
into that,
Oh, yeah.
right?
yes.
Yes.
And as the day continued, our shift had started at like 4 that morning, and it was 7 that night when they finally kicked us out. The other shift had come in at 4 p.m. and we just wanted to keep working, right? There's a crisis and everybody's just
Yeah.
all hands on deck.
Yeah.
But quite rightly, some of the senior leadership said, no, because we need you back at 4 a.m. This is not going to be a one-day crisis. We have
Mhm.
got to get our battle rhythm, if you will, right? And you can see that. I think that correlates some to business organization as well. When there's a crisis, right? You
Mhm.
initially respond to the crisis, but then you have to set up that crisis management flow that's going to last more than
Yeah.
24 hours.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A lot of companies have crisis management plans. And I mean,
Yes.
if you think back to that day, everybody was pulling out their crisis
Oh,
management
yes.
plans. And yet there were so many unpredictable things that nobody could fathom that the plans weren't necessarily relevant. So
Right.
let's talk about that aspect of it. You mentioned something in the first segment about having regular communication.
And practice.
Right. Talk to us
Yes.
about that.
So I think it was very fortunate for us that we were all already in Cheyenne Mountain for an exercise. We're normally not there. We're normally in, military office buildings at a half hour away.
Mhm.
So the fact that everybody was there really helped. But then after that, right, after we make the initial authoritative decisions, if you will, right, now we need to communicate. I know General Eberhardt's communicating to the president. At our level, we're communicating with our air defense assets that we normally communicate with. We're communicating with well, we were trying to communicate with the joint staff at the Pentagon, but after the Pentagon got hit, that didn't work
Mhm.
very well, right? So then we're just kind of doing things on our own without guidance that we would normally get, right? We're just basically operating in our own kind of closed loop for a little bit.
So you too were in the same spot. We were all in that same spot together.
Yes.
Strategies, plans, carefully practiced plans, contingency plans. We all have them. And especially in the military, you would think. And yet this was beyond any of that. Yet it kept you going. So, what would you say we could take from this experience?
I think that while preparation is incredibly important, and while we try to anticipate all the threats or risks or challenges we're going to face,
Mm,
that only will get you so far, right? And then you're going to have to just rely on instinct, experience to make decisions in the moment the best that you can, and hope that you've developed your team enough that they're willing to help you make those decisions and execute those decisions.
And that's something that we emphasize all the time. And I'm glad you brought it up because the more frequently and regularly you speak with a wide range of people, you talk about instinct, that builds instinct.
right. And so often we rely on the same people. Oh, these are the only people we have to consult with. These are the only people we have to
Yeah.
take into account. And what I'm getting from you, Sharon, is that you have to really go wide beyond just who's in your immediate view and think about the impacts on you and the impacts that you're having on a wide range of people. That's
Yeah.
where confidence comes in, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yes. Yes.
And that can be challenging to do. What's your take on that?
One thing, as fighter pilots, we learn to be decisive very quick, very early on, right?
Yeah.
That transcends into other parts of our lives and other parts of our leadership and other parts of our work. And I think that, your track record of making good decisions helps you build confidence,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right? That's obviously one way that you get confidence in your decision-making process. But I think also choosing who you listen to and how you intake information also greatly impacts your confidence. Pam and I have talked about this before, but being the first woman to fly in the F-16 was not an easy experience.
Yeah. I
I
can
have spent
imagine.
my entire adult life in communities where I'm underrepresented, if you will, as in the only woman pilot on the base most times. So it's easy to let other people erode your confidence when you're in that kind of situation, because there were a lot of people initially who didn't think I should be flying fighters. So I think that's the same thing can happen in business, right?
Sure.
If you
Sure.
listen to all the negativity around whatever event we're talking about, then you're not going to see maybe the opportunities for your
Yeah.
company that could also come with that event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's very important that we learn to filter out the thoughts we let inside our brain. And I call
Okay.
it the gatekeeper.
Now we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll speak more with pilot and speaker Sharon Preszler about her 3 immediately useful ideas for drawing on what she calls the internal gatekeeper as you're making these really gut-wrenching decisions when every second counts. Stay with us.
You are listening to Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper. We're brought to you by Business Advancement Incorporated, where we focus on enabling visionary leaders to dramatically increase the momentum it takes to achieve game-changing results. We're on the web at businessadvance.com.
Have you ever wondered if so many top leaders believe it's important to lead for business transformation and long-term growth in a really rapidly changing world, why can it be so challenging to break what I call the orbit of the status quo? Now, this is where you're focused on this year's business cycle, but nothing's moving forward. As an author and advisor to top leadership teams focused on growing their companies into the future, that was the question that led me to a long search for answers. So what's the secret of the great leaders? The ones I call growth igniters, the ones who are able to bring a bold transformational vision to life, even as the world keeps changing in unpredictable ways. That's what I talk about in my keynote, Break Orbit, Achieving Long-Term Growth in a Short-Term World.
Go to PamHarperSpeaks.com today, and you can find out more about Pam's keynote and her availability to speak at your next leadership conference or executive retreat.
Welcome back to Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper. Over the last 2 segments, Scott and I have been speaking with pilot and speaker Sharon Preszler about making leadership decisions, the toughest leadership decisions, the high-stakes leadership decisions, when every second counts. Sharon, remind us how people can find out more about you, your speaking, and anything else you'd like us to know.
Yes, one of the best places is my website, which is sharonpreszler.com. And also I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a Substack as well that talks some of my challenges as a woman in the military and the airline industry and some of the current topics in defense and the world.
And you can find more information and links for this episode by going to growthignitersradio.com, episode 419, and scrolling down to resources. So we're at the part of our episode where we talk about 3 immediately useful, tangible ideas. And in this case, it's to draw on your internal gatekeeper to become even more confident as you're making decisions, especially when every second counts. And this is for even the most experienced top leaders. We all have voices that we hear in our heads sometimes, So let's talk about the first idea.
So the first idea, and this comes from my experience when I was struggling a little bit in F-16 training, and I was really listening too much to others, and it was eroding my confidence. And I created my internal gatekeeper, and I found it very valuable to give that gatekeeper a physical representation.
Okay.
So I've talked about this with others, and for me, with all my time in the Air Force, my physical gatekeeper looks a lot like an Air Force gate, right? When you drive up to the base, there's barriers, there's pop-up barriers in case somebody tries to ram it with a truck. There's, security guards with checking your identification. That's my gatekeeper because that's just applicable to me. But I worked with others who have used, think about a bouncer at a high-end nightclub, right? Who's deciding who gets in and who gets out. Or, the alien, the monster from the Alien, or The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, those kind of things. You have a physical representation that you can see in your brain actually keeping the negative ideas out.
So the idea drives up to the gate, and what happens?
The other part is you have to train your gatekeeper, right? So they know who to let in, what ideas to let in, and what ideas to let out. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then basically, if you know you have something coming into your brain that shouldn't be allowed in, then you just, in your brain, you go, okay, keep that guy out. Rock, get rid of that guy. I'm not taking that one. Whatever it is. No matter how good you get at this, there's times when things are going to sneak past your gatekeeper, right? And then you have to be able to kick them back out. When you feel yourself dwelling on something somebody's input that really isn't valid or a negativity that you don't need, then you have to use your gatekeeper to kick that back out.
Okay, so you've got your gatekeeper set. How does the gatekeeper know when something is toxic and invasive and when it's not?
So, I mean, it's all really your decisions, right? And you're just training and empowering your
Right,
gatekeeper.
right.
One of the first questions for me is, do I respect the person making the comment,
Ah,
providing the thought, providing the input? And not just do I respect them personally, but are they credible in the industry? Have they given you good advice before? Those kind of things, right? So you evaluate the communicator, if you will, before you even evaluate the idea.
If you're listening or you're watching and you want to actually do something with this, the first
Yes.
thing is really visualize, describe maybe even in writing
Yep.
what it is that your gatekeeper is. And the second is which voices are you
Yeah.
going to
Then
consider?
then it's important. Yeah. Once you've developed your gatekeeper visually and you have that good representation, now you have to train your gatekeeper.
okay.
Okay.
I've worked with a bunch of different teams, and there's often like that one kind of negative person that
Of course.
Yeah.
often sees the bad and everything. And well, you don't want to never listen to them.
Yeah.
They're one of the people I definitely evaluate the idea very strongly, because that person already has a kind of, most of the time you're not getting in past my
Mhm.
gatekeeper kind of attitude, right? Negativity doesn't help me move forward. It doesn't help me make decisions. It doesn't help me see options. What stakeholders are going to be the best to provide input on this particular challenge you're facing?
Okay. I just want to add when you have battling stakeholders
Yes.
and the interests are dramatically different, that's where we see top leadership teams having real issues. Can you speak to that with this gatekeeper approach?
Yes. And that's kind of the third idea, right? So the
Okay.
first is create the gatekeeper. The second is train the gatekeeper
Uh,
on who you tend to listen to,
yeah,
right? But the third is, regardless of the person, because even sometimes you're going to have to listen to that negative guy, right?
sure.
What
Mhm.
is the input? And now you evaluate the input itself. Is it constructive? Is it valuable for my team? Is it going to help me make decisions or move the mission forward and
Yeah.
move the vision forward? Right. So then that's the next step, is to really look at that. And when you have battling stakeholders like you're talking about, Pam, then it's a matter of who is most impacted by the challenge we're facing, and how is responding to this challenge going to be best overall for all the stakeholders,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't just focus on one stakeholder, right,
Mhm.
at the expense of the others.
So you got to be careful that your gatekeeper isn't too stringent. That's what you
Yes.
said. And absolutely.
And sometimes those battles can be fierce.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, we're talking at the top, I'm thinking some of the boardroom and C suite battles I've seen.
Drama.
And there's a lot of drama and a lot of considerations about which way are we going to go and what the impact's going to be. That's the gut wrenching part. You have to listen and reconcile it. And in a changing world and where there's so much uncertainty and so much complexity, at the end of the day, we have to go with what our best estimate is,
Yes.
then keep adjusting.
And that's building up your instincts ahead of time will make that decision a lot easier when the pressure is on.
Yes. And if you understand your team, if you understand all your stakeholders, then some of them will fight more fiercely for their little stake
Yeah.
than others, right? Where others will sometimes see more of the bigger picture, and they will be more open to solutions that don't necessarily build up their particular stakeholder piece, but is better for the overall long-term vision of the company. And then that will in long term be better for them.
Okay.
And then
So we are at the end of our episode. Can you leave us with some final thoughts about making these leadership decisions when every second counts?
I think that the most critical piece is to develop your team in a way that they believe and trust in you. So when you have to make authoritative decisions, split second decisions, they will support you and execute that decision in good faith. And the way
Okay.
to do that is truly communication and empathy and understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so true. Well, Sharon, thank you so much for being our guest on Growth Igniters Radio.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We appreciate you, Sharon. And to all of you out there listening to Growth Igniters Radio
Or watching.
Thanks to you as well. To contact us and get show notes and resource links from this week's episode, even schedule a call with us. Go to growthignitersradio.com and select episode 419.
Until next time, this is Pam Harper
And Scott Harper.
wishing you continued success and leaving you with this question to think about and act upon. Starting today, what can I do and what can we do to internalize what really matters to us and take into consideration our many stakeholders, not just the few, as we move into completely uncharted territory.
Growth Igniters and Growth Igniters Radio with Pam Harper and Scott Harper are registered service marks of Business Advancement Incorporated. All Growth Igniters Radio episodes are copyrighted productions of Business Advancement Incorporated, intended for the private use of our audience. Except as otherwise provided by copyright law, all other uses including copying, editing, redistribution, and publication without prior written consent of Business Advancement Incorporated are prohibited. All rights reserved.